Chapter 1. On the 9th day before his 16th birthday, Josiah was allowed to move back in with his mother, who had recently become engaged to a man named Johnson Davis. Johnson Davis also had a child, a girl, 17, fully human, named Bree, who spent time with her father, Johnson Davis, only on the weekends. Josiah did not move back into the home where he and his mother had lived together much of his life, and which, after 2 years away, he was looking forward to seeing again. Rather, Josiah moved into the home of Johnson Davis, where Johnson Davis now lived with Josiah's mother, as he had for the past 4.5 months, having previously lived in the same house for many years with his wife, now former wife, who divorced him because he reportedly made her feel like a child, and his daughter, Bree, and later where he lived by himself, and Bree on the weekends, for a year and 3 months. When Josiah first saw Bree, he thought she was pretty. He liked the way she looked in her soccer uniform. When she looked at him for the first time, she smiled. He looked away. Up until 1 week after Josiah moved into the home of Johnson Davis, Josiah had eaten nothing but chocolate. He ate chocolate for breakfast, for lunch, as an afternoon snack, and of course he ate chocolate for dinner and sometimes as a midnight snack. Chocolate ice cream, chocolate brownies, chocolate donuts, chocolate candy bars, and cake and mousse, and pudding, and his very favorite chocolate cream pie. Josiah, however, was in perfectly good health. He exercised often, had a relatively fast metabolism, and most importantly was not fully human, his mother having been impregnated with him during an alien abduction her freshman year in college, thereby making him insusceptible to many of the nutritional laws that typically affect the human race. Josiah's mother would say, "You can eat all the chocolate you want. The planet Parnuckle, which is the home planet of your father, and therefore is your home as well, will always be your home, even though you have never been there, and possibly never will. But it will always be there as your home, because it is the home of your father, just like this home, which is my home, and also your home, is also your home, even if you grow up and move far away, as long as you live, or unless I move to another home. But then that home will also be your home. Your father, on the other hand, will never leave Parnuckle, so that will not be an issue." Of course, that's not quite fair, as it's comparing a house on a planet to a planet. I, likewise, will never leave this planet, nor will this house, or any house I may be living in, either in the future or whenever. Other children, Josiah's mother continued, cannot eat all of the chocolate they want. If they did, they would get sick and they would get fat. But your body is different. Your body is part Parnucklian, and Parnucklians eat nothing but chocolate. It is their only food. Of course, they do not call it chocolate because they speak Parnucklian, and the word chocolate is an earthling word. They call it bobbly, which is Parnucklian for chocolate. The home of Johnson Davis was larger than the home that Josiah and his mother had lived in. The home of Johnson Davis was blue and had 2 stories, and unlike the home that Josiah had lived in with his mother, the home of Johnson Davis did not look exactly like the other houses on the same street. The home of Johnson Davis also had a large front lawn with green grass. The front yard of the home of Johnson Davis was not surrounded by a fence. The front yard of the home that Josiah had lived in with his mother, which was not as green as the front yard of the home of Johnson Davis, had been surrounded by a short chain-link fence with a little gate in the front that was always open because the latch was bent. As Johnson Davis pulled into the driveway, Josiah's mother leaned over the front seat to address Josiah, who was sitting in the back, and said, "Josiah, this is Mr. Davis's home. This is where we will be staying from now on." Earlier that day, Josiah had been led to a room in the group home that he did not remember ever having been in before. This room was the lobby, and waiting in the lobby for Josiah was his mother and a man who had his hand on Josiah's mother's back. As Josiah entered the room, Josiah's mother stepped forward and hugged him and started to cry a little bit, and told him that she was so happy to see him and that she was so happy that they were going to be together again. Josiah's mother then stepped back and stood again next to the man. The man again put his hand on Josiah's mother's back. Josiah's mother looked much older than Josiah had remembered her. She was wearing a light green sundress with a short white sweater over it. The man next to her looked older than her. He wore a brown sweater and had a gray beard. Josiah's mother said, "I'd like you to meet someone very special. This is my new friend, Mr. Davis." The man next to Josiah's mother, who was Johnson Davis, stepped forward and took Josiah's hand. He shook Josiah's hand very deliberately. "Mr. Davis is my fiancé, Josiah," Josiah's mother said. "We are engaged. We are going to be married." Josiah nodded. Once, when Josiah was very young, around 5 years old, he went with his mother to the grocery store to shop for groceries. Josiah often went with his mother to the grocery store to shop for groceries because she was a single mother, and she could not leave him alone at that age, and also because he was very attached to his mother and loved her very much. While in the bread aisle shopping for little bobbly donuts, Josiah saw a plastic bag containing round bread with the word Bobbly printed on it. Later, when he and his mother were in the car on the way home, Josiah told her that he had seen a bag in the store with the word Bobbly printed on it, and he was going to ask her if this could possibly mean that there were other Parnucklians living nearby, or maybe even part Parnucklians like him. And he was also going to ask why the bag that said Bobbly had some kind of round bread in it and no Bobbly at all. But before he could ask, Josiah's mother reached across the cab of the car and grabbed Josiah by the forearm, pushing her fingernails into his skin. "Never interrupt Mommy while Mommy is driving," Josiah's mother said. When Josiah's mother let go of Josiah's arm, Josiah watched as the little white half moons on his arm turned pink and disappeared. Johnson Davis and his fiancée, Josiah's mother, led Josiah through the doorway and into the home of Johnson Davis. Inside the doorway of the home of Johnson Davis was a square section of linoleum. The linoleum was white with blue checkered lines and was just big enough for Johnson Davis and Josiah's mother and Josiah to all stand on at once, which they did after passing through the doorway. Johnson Davis and Josiah's mother each lifted one foot and began taking off their shoes. Johnson Davis encouraged Josiah to take off his own shoes by saying to Josiah, "Josiah, this is where we keep our shoes," and stepping toward a corner of the square of linoleum next to the door, and bending down onto one knee and placing his shoes, a pair of dark blue loafers, very carefully side by side in the corner, and twisting his torso halfway around to receive the shoes of his fiancée, a green slip-on shoe with no heel, which she handed to Johnson Davis already carefully aligned side by side, in which Johnson Davis received two-handed, maintaining their alignment as he turned back toward the corner and placed the pair neatly beside his own. Johnson Davis then looked with anticipation toward Josiah, his two hands raised slightly in the same direction. Josiah took off his right shoe and then his left shoe. He held the two shoes side by side and handed them to Johnson Davis, who further aligned the pair before carefully placing them beside the other two. Johnson Davis then stood and extended his arm, waving it slowly across the space in front of him. "Welcome home, Josiah," Johnson Davis said as Josiah's mother placed her hands on each of Josiah's arms, just below the shoulders, and squeezed. Johnson Davis and Josiah's mother then showed Josiah the living room, which they were in after taking a few steps off of the linoleum square and onto the beige carpet, as well as the kitchen, which was bright, and the dining room, which Josiah thought was dark, even though the lights were on, and which was decorated so that it resembled the dining room of a boat of some kind, with a thick rope running along the top of the wall and one of those large wooden pirate ship steering wheels on one wall, similar to one Josiah had seen in a movie about children who had to battle against pirates on a pirate ship. The home that Josiah had lived in with his mother had not had a dining room. Josiah and his mother had eaten most of their meals at a yellow table in their kitchen. Johnson Davis and Josiah's mother also showed Josiah the laundry room and the back porch and the garage, which was full of brown boxes, and the backyard, which like the front yard was also large and filled with green grass, but had a tall wooden fence running around it, until finally reaching the upstairs, where, after first being quickly shown the bedroom of Johnson Davis, where, as Josiah's mother explained to Josiah, Josiah's mother spent the nights with Johnson Davis, Josiah was shown his own bedroom. Josiah's bedroom in the home he lived in with his mother had been filled with posters of Mark Harmon, who at the time that the posters were purchased and hung, was the star of a popular television program that took place in a hospital. Josiah's mother told Josiah, once he was old enough to understand, that the reason his room was filled with posters of the television actor Mark Harmon was that Mark Harmon was the one earthling male of the earthling males that Josiah's mother was familiar with that most closely resembled Josiah's father on Parnuckle. And since Josiah's mother, understandably so, had no actual photographs of Josiah's father on Parnuckle, and since Josiah's mother very much wanted Josiah to feel a closeness and a kinship with his father, and to be surrounded by his image and his presence, and since Mark Harmon himself was an exceptionally gifted actor and accomplished individual that would be an inspiration to any young man, Josiah's mother thought it fitting that she should fill Josiah's bedroom with various images of Mark Harmon, including one of Mark Harmon walking on a beach in only his shorts with a dog jumping nearby, and one of Mark Harmon wearing the white lab coat and serious look of his character on television, and one of Mark Harmon wearing a suit and looking nonchalantly over his shoulder, and half a dozen others. At the group home, unlike the home he had lived in with his mother or his room in the home of Johnson Davis, Josiah had not had his own room. Josiah had shared a room with 3 other boys. The room Josiah lived in with the 3 other boys was larger than any other room he had ever lived in, except that the other rooms Josiah had lived in he had not had to share.